All right, you are with DG's at 30-something. It's a very special panel from Casa Grande High School, and we have some special guests that I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. You are on KPCA Radio 103.3 and at kpca.fm to listen live. Alrighty, so today's show is on a very important issue that affects a lot of Americans of all ages and demographics. We have a show on mental health stigma and access to services, as well as general mental health issues. So I am going to start actually by opening it up to our live audience. We are at Todd Sider's class at Casa Grande High School again. And I'm going to actually start with you guys introducing your groups, and then I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and their specialties. Who wants to go first?
So my name is Erin, and I am with our classes group working towards expanding our school's resources as far as mental health, making sure students know what they have on campus as far as places to go if they have a crisis, or knowing places around the area to get in contact with.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor Curran. I represent a group that is destigmatizing mental health at Casa Grande High School. What we're doing is incorporating a local school, Cypress School, and it involves bringing kids who have autism and other certain mental health disabilities into our school, and it helps bring communication and socialization skills, and so it helps destigmatize it. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hi, I'm Claire, and we are working with a group here who is trying to work with the Petaluma Police Department and other local police departments and sheriff's offices to come up with better ways to handle mental health crises and episodes.
Is that everyone? Is there one more?
Is there another group? Who's the other group? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Eliza, and my partner Erica and I are working with the Petaluma School District to help get mental health incorporated into staff development days, to give teachers advice and to help them help us when we need a little bit of extra, time or something.
Awesome, so that's everyone now, right? It's 4. So I'm going to start by letting Dr. Karina Leary, who's right to my right, introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he does on the day-to-day.
Good morning, you guys. My name is Karina Leary. I'm a clinical psychologist here in Sonoma County as well as Marin County. I have a private practice up in Santa Rosa, and I do family and teen work. So helping families and teenagers figure out how to get through the stressors of life. And then I'm also working down at a community clinic in Marin City. My background's with teens and families, but in Marin City, there's a health clinic, and we serve everybody there. So I'm working with small kids all the way to 80, 90-year-olds. So it's pretty vast, and then a lot of focus on anxiety, depression, just stress in general, and then when it gets more extreme, trauma.
And why did you get into mental health?
Well, my mom was a school psychologist growing up, so I got to hear a lot of stories of her helping people, and I always thought it seemed pretty nice to try to help out people in this world. So at some point I just got interested in it in college, and then after that I figured there was something in my heart that felt like I wanted to give back, so I continued on.
Cool. So we'll turn it off to Rachel McDavid. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Sonoma County, and our mission is to provide education, support, and advocacy for all that are affected by mental health challenges. I myself have a mental health challenge, so I struggle with PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And what I like to say is recovery is in every moment. So sometimes, yesterday I had a rough day. But I got through it, and I celebrate that. I'm thankful for that because it is a struggle. and there's a lot of people struggling right now. So what NAMI does is we provide classes and support groups, right now just for adults, but we do have that, and we have the Warm Line, which is a number that anybody can call. So if you're having a rough day, this is for all ages. We haven't yet had a 5-year-old call, but if you have a, for yourself or a friend, if you're just struggling, you just want to talk to somebody, you can call us at 1-866-960-NAMI. And so you can just call and just talk to somebody, and then we're going to just sort of help you through that rough time, or for your loved one or your family member, and then we will provide resources too. So perhaps like refer you to a counselor, but really get you the help that you need so that you can also have a moment of recovery when you're struggling.
And NAMI, do you want to explain a little bit more about the organization? And I know it's national.
Yeah, so there's a national, so it's National Alliance on Mental Illness, so it's a large organization, but then what happens is there's state levels as well, so there's a NAMI California, and then we're called an affiliate, so we're a completely separate nonprofit organization that covers Sonoma County. Completely separate, but what we do is we use the signature programs from National, so they provide sort of like curriculum, they provide the curriculum for our classes, the outlines for our support groups, and then we obviously implement that in our own way, but yeah, so there's National as well.
Cool. I think there's a magazine. They do a magazine, right? NAMI National that goes out.
For our members?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
You won't see it on a magazine, what do they call it, the rack, but you can
Yeah.
get that
Yeah. Yes. Okay. It's a great resource nationally. So I will reintroduce myself. I came and spoke a couple weeks ago, but just to refresh everyone's memory, I think there's more people here too. So I am Dominica, and I have been working in communities for quite some time. I started working in Petaluma as a youth, well, now it's called the Youth Commission, but I was an original teen council member, and so I got into advocacy at age 14, if not at birth, arguably at birth. So I've always been really civically engaged, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofits. The mental health illness hits home to me. I have suffered from anxiety and some pretty severe depression throughout my life. And so I was exposed to just the issue of mental health at a very young age when I was in high school. This was the time, this is why it was so important for me to come in here and speak to high school classrooms, because this was the time when I really started to lose a handle I was lucky because I had access to services, but I did not access them because of the stigma around it. And I thought it made me feel weak, and so I didn't access the services until I was older. And so that's why I think it's a super important issue to address, and mental health is not well funded, in my opinion, at all. And there needs to be significant increases in access to service, because we're seeing significant increases in mental health occurrence. So that is what brought me here today, and I'm super excited to be here and talk to you about this issue, and about, I'm sure more of our stories will come out as the day goes on. But I just pulled a few numbers for you. I always like it to be a starting point about just the incidents in the country. So 1 in 5 adults have a mental health condition in the United States right now. 1 in 5, that's a lot of people. I actually probably should have pulled up that number, but 1 in 5. And then rates of youth depression have increased. In 2011, it was 8.5%, and now it's 11.8%. And there's something that I was thinking about this story this morning, that when I finally did access mental health services, a really interesting thing happened, because I went to my therapist and I said, oh, well, all teenagers are hormonal and have depression. Because that's what we were told. That's what I was told. Like, oh, you're being hormonal, you're a teenager, that's how it works. And she looked me straight in the eyes and said, that's absolutely not true. That's not true. Not all teenagers have depression or other issues. That's a certain part of the population that suffer from it. And let's see. So 56% of adults do not receive mental health treatment. So that's pretty significant amount of people, that some of which probably need services and aren't accessing them. There's only 1 mental health professional for 1,000 people in the United States, which I thought that was a really interesting statistic myself, because I'm just around it so much. I assumed that there was just way more mental health professionals around, but 1 for every 1,000 people. And if 1 in 5 of those adults have a mental health condition, that's not enough services to service all those individuals. Let's see, over 57,000 people with mental illness are in prison or jail. That is actually I remember learning this when I did my psychology undergrad education, about the high incidence of mental health in prisons and jails, and that being a solution to that problem. and not a good one, obviously. That's not the proper solution. A lot of people with mental health issues end up in jail. And so that was all from MHA America, the data. And then, let's see. So there's actually been, amongst youth, I thought this was some interesting, this is from SAMHSA's website, which is another great organization to look up. There's been amongst youth, there's been a decrease in binge alcohol use, cigarette use, and illicit drug use, but there's still significant health disparities between white people and people of color. So we still see some disparities in use. And I found this interesting because the mental health rates are going up, but the silver lining in it is that younger people are not binging and smoking as many cigarettes and using as many illicit drugs. It's not a super significant decrease, but it's definitely a decrease. So, and then probably one of the most shocking statistics I've ever heard that kind of set me back as soon as I heard it is that the leading cause of death internationally now among women 15 to 24 years of age is suicide. So that is a pretty, it's pretty shocking to me. I don't know about anyone else on the panel, but that was probably one of the most shocking statistics I ever heard. It really hit home. So we know that we have an issue in the United States, and then internationally it's a serious issue, especially for women 15 to 24 years old. So I don't know if anyone here wanted to add something, if anything came to mind before we start getting some questions.
I just want to say it's definitely a hot topic, especially on suicide. I'm curious if anybody here has seen 13 Reasons Why. Yeah, see some nods. So that's, been very controversial, right? Which, of course, if it's controversial, like, ooh, what's that? But it's really important just to recognize that, it could be a catalyst for us to have conversations about suicide. Yes, it's a drama, right? Yes, it's romanticized. So it's important for us to realize that's not reality, but it is an opening, So have conversations with your friends and really know it's important to reach out if you're ever struggling with depression or with suicidal thoughts. Just know it's okay to talk about it. That's really going to help all of us if we can really move through that together, because when we lose somebody in our community, it impacts everybody, not just the loved ones or the family. So please just know that, when we're having these kind of conversations, it's really going to open it up more so we can really save people. So when if your friends talk to you about it, and if a friend is saying something like, man, I just don't want to be here anymore, like not just school, but overall, I don't want to be here anymore. And if they're really, just having a hard time, use that as an opening and really ask some questions. And it's really okay to ask, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself or killing yourself? That's not going to plant the seed. That's often the fear is like, oh my gosh, that's going to put the idea in their head, But it's not, because if they're having that thought, I've been there myself, I've been hospitalized for attempting suicide. And it's if you ask them that directly, they're going to be like, oh, phew, finally, somebody is asking me what I want to know. So really know it's okay to have that conversation.
Well, I want to echo that too, because I realized that, in my adulthood, I've been able to be open about my mental health situation when I was younger, but my friends said all the time, I wish you would have said something, and I was too tough to say anything. So I didn't say anything, but that's what I always hear all the time. I wish you would have said something and let us know that something was going on so that we could, be more supportive in that manner. So it's just talking to your friends. They're there for you.
Yeah, and also, to ask questions. So if you have a friend who you just notice, maybe like she's, she or he is just like seem to be struggling or not showing up to school a lot or just sort of flaking on you, and just not wanting to hang out as much and they're just isolating themselves or not eating as much, just notice those signs and then have that inquiry and ask questions, because that, again, will leave the door open for them. Because they might, like you're saying, might not feel because of stigma that it's okay to even approach it or say, I'm having a rough day. They'll say, I'm fine. A lot of times people say that to me and it's just like, clearly you're not fine. So really, ask questions.
Okay, so I think we're going to open up for questions now. So I'm not sure if anyone wanted to spark a question out.
So obviously there's a lot of issues with talking about mental health, and there is that stigma, and there are issues outside of that as well. What do you think the biggest hurdle is that we need to kind of get over to help create a safer and more accepting environment kind of globally for mental health?
That's a big question.
Want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think that what we need to do is really, we stigmatize mental health challenges when we use the words things like crazy or you're insane or you're loca, you know? So it's like when we're using those words in our cultures and our communities, we're already creating this feeling that it's not okay to talk about it. Because I don't want to be labeled that way, you know, I don't want to be joked about or put down. So we really need to watch how we talk about it. And it just, again, really making it okay to have somebody say, I'm really feeling sad right now, and not make fun of them, especially if they're a guy, right? Because there's the whole man box. I don't know if you've heard about that. So there's a man box of how men are supposed to be a certain way. They're not supposed to have feelings besides maybe anger. So really, we need to overcome all of these stereotypes and all these judgments that we have, and really have it be more acceptable for us to have our feelings. And again, really try not to label it. For me, that's the biggest thing. When I have my friends who say, you know, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I'm just like, you know, it's like, let's not use that, because again, for myself, having struggled with anxiety and PTSD and depression, it's like, wow, that makes me feel like I really want to talk to you right now, you know? So let's not use those kind of labels. I think that's the first step, because then it's showing that we care and that we're trying to change the way we think about our mental well-being, which we all have mental health. Just sometimes we have challenges along the way.
So I think the languaging piece is super important. This is kind of my wheelhouse, is breaking down mental health stigma. And I work with a lot of different programs all over the world, really, and I get asked that question all the time. Well, what mental health program do we need to develop in order to make people access services? And even when I was working down in Marin City, it was the same question was, well, how do we get people to access services? And I said, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to change the languaging about mental health in general. So in order for a program to be successful, you also need to get people in the door. In order to get people in the door, we have to break down that stigma and the languaging around mental health illness. I decided when I was much younger that I was always going to correct people when they use, a big one when I was growing up was, oh, that's psycho, you're a psycho. And now we don't use that word at all, but I would always correct people and give them the definition of what a psychopath was, just to check their facts. If you're going to use that word, make sure you're using it correctly. The other one we always use all the time is, oh, you're a schizo. So I would, kindly define what a schizophrenic was to them, and just making it more humanizing, because mental health illness is so prevalent. I think just changing that languaging about the words we use, and the start is with, the major mental illnesses, they're not as common, but if we're using those words freely and people don't really understand what it is, and then people don't really understand what it is, we have a hard time identifying it. So when someone actually does have some sort of an issue, we don't know how to identify it because it's been stigmatized so much, and the languaging is so poorly used. Like I said, when I was told growing up that all teenagers are depressed, that's when you go out and tell, that's like the culture is that all teenagers are depressed, then you have a hard time identifying when there really is an issue. So I think the languaging piece and how we talk about it and talking about it is a big, big issue, especially now. Now's the time, because people are having a lot of stress and a lot of trauma experiences, all different shapes and sizes and forms. And then also the other thing that I've learned with my friends is to not downplay what they're going through. Sometimes, for me, growing up with anxiety, I had to spend my whole life learning how to have anxiety. Like, you just have to learn. And so little things would tip me off. Little tiny, like I can admit, even as an adult, I went to the coffee shop, and it really bothers me that people pour some of their coffee into the garbage can. And I'm like losing my mind over these people putting coffee in the garbage can because I was just having a hard, rough day. And so, not downplaying those things when, maybe our friends, family, colleagues, fellow students are having a rough day, and something seemingly small to you, it could potentially totally set them off into some sort of like panic response. So I think just understanding what mental health looks like, talking about it, and understanding it kind of does look different for everyone. So
I'd like to add too, and it's also important to see the person first. So if somebody has schizophrenia or has bipolar depression, you don't say that person's schizophrenic, right? It's just like, wow, that's really great, you just put me in a box. It's like, now that's my name, is schizophrenic. That's really obviously not very thoughtful or not very recognizing of them as a whole person. So just as we have a lot of experiences and characteristics that make up who we are, our mental health challenges is just one of them. So just if you ever are in conversation, you just say that person has schizophrenia or that person struggles with bipolar, you know, really reflecting as something that they have and they can, you know, overcome. There is recovery.
I just want to add on to what you guys said as far as the vocabulary that we use is really important. So even the idea of mental health, whenever I hear this, immediately we start talking about depression, anxiety, all these things that are actually mental, more along dysfunction. We talk about mental health. We all have mental health, whether it's good or whether it's poor right now, whether yesterday was good and today it's poor. And so if we just start with that we all, I'm assuming we want to be mentally healthy, and that changes day to day. Some days we wake up and our parents stress us out. Some days we have a test, we wake up, we're stressed out. And if we just start with this idea that from day to day this might change, and that sometimes we need help to deal with stress. Is anyone in here, everyone experienced stress before? Right, so it can do lots of things to you, right? A lot of the times we label things depression, anxiety, trauma, but these are the extremes of things. These are when stress is where it all starts. Stress gets more stress, mom and dad stress you out, teachers stress you out, your friends stress you out. It leads to depression, it leads to anxiety. So we start talking about mental health and immediately people think, well, I'm not crazy, I don't have schizophrenia, I'm not bipolar, sometimes I have anxiety, but I don't want to be labeled anxious. And people come in and they talk to me and they say, so what did you give me? What am I? And I say, I don't know, you're an individual that I'm talking to and this is what's stressing you out. So how do we help you manage your stress? So if we start if we start looking at mental health as just like we do physical health, you know, sometimes you go into the doctor just to get checked out to make sure everything's okay. Or you say, hey, I have a cold, I just want to make sure it's not going to get worse. And they say, no, you're good, you'll be fine in 2 days. Now, if it gets more severe, you come in and you say, whoa, I don't know what's going on, but I've been having to sink for like a month and it's not going away. So now you look at, this is, you know, physical health or how we say mental health. We're looking at things that are a little more extreme. But if we want to bring it back to where it's not stigmatized, we all face stress. And as teenagers, sometimes talking to your friends is the best thing. And sometimes they're as lost and clueless as you are. So asking what you should do about your boyfriend or girlfriend when they just broke up with theirs or cheated on theirs, it's not the best person to ask. And asking mom and dad isn't always good because you don't really want their advice necessarily or them to even know what you're up to. Coming in for mental health, my viewpoint in working with teens is that I'm not your mom or dad. If I was on their team, then we probably wouldn't get very far. I'm here to find out what's going on for you, who you are, what stresses you out. And if you can figure out how to get yourself out of stressful situations, how to communicate, how to step back, how to strategize, how to have coping skills, then a lot of the time the stress doesn't turn to depression or turn to anxiety. Now, other times there are things that run in families, genetically, socially, ways that we've learned things. So anxiety and depression might play a role. But people that are anxious and depressed, they're not always in these states. You know, they're not just an anxious person, like you said. Mm-hmm. Somebody that they have schizophrenia, they're not schizophrenic. You know, people have anxiety, they're not just an anxious person. In certain settings, they're anxious. So you come in just to get a feedback and find out what works for you, where you empower yourself, how you allow anxiety to go away, or how you keep depression at bay. And then when it comes or it shows up, what you do about it. And it doesn't have to be stigmatized because it's not who you are, it's just something you're going through. So you manage it, you figure out who do I talk to. You start to realize that, oh wow, if this comes up again, I don't have to feel suicidal this time because I have a number I can call, I have somebody I can talk to, I have friends that care. And so if we start thinking about our mental health as I want to feel good as much as I can, and knowing what to do, whether that's talking to somebody, journaling, whether that's talking to friends, going to a therapist, talking to your parents, that this can really help us get the help we need rather than trying to hide or feel like we're in a shadow of something that's, you know, has a stigma around it.
I appreciate that a lot because that is a big point of conversation is really should we be breaking up health and mental health? Because they're not, it's all health. And it really should be, my background's in public health, to remind everyone here, and this is an issue that we grapple with all the time. And what I was thinking about when you're saying you're not this person, we would never. I mean, we talk about diabetics that way too. We talk about like, oh, you're a diabetic. It's like, no, I'm a person, and I have diabetes. And I think that that's really important across the board and all different things. Is that do we even want to say mental health? Do we even want to break it out? We're healthy humans, and we have to do a lot of different things to be healthy humans, and dealing with issues. So that's just something I just wanted to pitch that out there. That's what I thought of when you were talking about that. Like, you should be able to go to the doctor and say, I'm having X, Y, and Z issues, and maybe they have to send you somewhere else to get more specialized care, but it shouldn't be this individualized issue. It should be a whole people, and we have all different kinds of issues that we have to deal with.
And there's a movement towards that in the health system of looking at whole person, and especially the more community-based service providers, like Petaluma Health Centers. They're looking at the whole person, and they'll have different services there available. So there's an area for mental health. There's the dental and there's the physical. The challenge is though, we do have a law. It's called parity. Anybody heard of that? The parity law? That's okay, I didn't hear about it until I started this job. So the parity law, there's a federal parity law and there's a California, which is really good, so we get double protection. The parity law states that your insurance provider, so if you have Kaiser or if you have St. Joseph, that they have to provide equal amount of treatment around mental health as they do physical. So if you do a copay, where the insurance covers part of your payment to the doctor to go see the doctor, for a physical ailment, then for your mental health, it's the same thing. They should cover part of it. So just so you know, that's actually a law that is making insurance providers have to do that. Do they? What do you guys think? Do you think they always follow that? Unfortunately, they don't. So you have to really be aware that is something that you have as an option, is that you can go see your doctor and you can see a psychiatrist and have it be covered in your insurance. And just know you can. They probably just might not tell you that right away, but just know that's something that is by law they have to provide. And there's ways to even, it's really, again, it's a big shift, so there's ways to file a complaint. Because again, insurance providers, they're not so eager to have to cough up the money to have you see a psychiatrist. But they're more than happy to give you some, pills for something else. So just know that is a law that they have to cover it.
That brings to, and I don't know if there are questions that would come up about this, but this brings up a point that hits home, is that we're speaking a lot about, we're speaking with the assumption that everyone has health insurance and has access to care. So, because I know that came up when I visited the classroom before. We talked a lot about the issue with, there's only one counselor on campus, I believe, and she's booked out already and can't accept new students unless they're in a crisis type situation. So I don't know if anyone wants to, I know someone was talking about that before, and I asked some questions about if she was available, how do you feel as a student going to a counselor at your school? Does anyone want to answer that again? Someone answered that before. Let's answer it again.
So on our campus, we do have one professional therapist per se. Her name is Elizabeth Black, and she is working with the school, and she's here Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And as well, there is a counselor in the Petaluma Health Clinic. They also have a little site here on campus who is also available Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So if a student needs to speak to someone about, again, if they're in a crisis or if they're in a situation where they need help and guidance, we also have on-campus counselors who aren't trained necessarily as, therapists or in the mental health field. And my group personally has gone and has talked to them. We've had a couple interviews. And the situation is essentially that if it's a Monday or a Friday and a student needs some help and they go to a on-school, on-site, just regular counselor, usually what happens is the counselor will just call the parents if they have to. And then the child's parent will come onto campus and, they'll talk things through. Maybe they'll try and schedule later, on a different day if possible. But from a student perspective, that definitely can make me feel a little, I guess, unsure of how much support I can get on campus. I understand that there are some people here who are willing to help, which is great, but our counselors who are on campus are completely booked, and that makes it tough for me to kind of know, I guess, when I can get help if I need it. Personally, I am fortunate enough to have a therapist that I'm seeing outside of school, but if I weren't in that position, if I didn't have, health insurance that could cover it, if I didn't have the time or the money to go see someone, then I don't know how I would feel on campus. If I would feel like I had a reliable place to go to talk to someone. So actually a question that I have for you guys would just be, for teens or, youth. I know you said that NAMI is for adults specifically, but
Except for the warm line, we can accept it. Call in.
Yeah, except for the warm line. But would you have any, I guess, advice for students who are, if you know any support groups around the area, or if you just have any tips for anyone who is, looking, I guess, for some more support? I know that there's stuff online where you can anonymously talk to people and just vent, or just things like that, if you have any advice.
We have a great resource. Well, we have two, really, but we have Petaluma People Services, which is a great agency, and they provide mental health services on a sliding scale. So I would definitely recommend, again, you have to understand, I guess, your health insurance in order to access through your health insurance. But if you do not want to do it through your health insurance, you can go to resources like Petaluma People Services. And then the Petaluma Health Center has now some pretty significantly expanded services as well. So those are two options for students. If you have Kaiser or Sutter Insurance, you can access services there again. But Petaluma People Services is a great resource in this community.
And if you don't have insurance, you might have Medi-Cal. So again, I didn't figure out insurance until I think I was maybe 25. So I don't expect you guys to be figuring yours out or to already know. But if you do need help, look at, maybe ask your parents. Just I'm just curious, what provider we have. They'll probably be like, what? But find out, because Medi-Cal does provide services through the county. So Sonoma County Behavioral Health Division, it's a whole department of the county. They do a really good job of providing services for people who don't have insurance that do have Medi-Cal. So just something to look into as well. Or Medicaid, yeah.
Yeah, and Petaluma, I think both Petaluma People Services and the Health Center accept Medi-Cal. So.
And I can say too, it's tough because if conversations get really deep and difficult, obviously you don't want to be in a situation where you feel overwhelmed, by what somebody's sharing with you. But again, there is something about community that can, I think, fill in some of these gaps when we don't have immediate service. So that's what we at NAMI, we really practice that with our warm line, is that, again, it's just somebody to listen. And of course, they're trained, they're trained staff and volunteers. So as if you want to do as a senior project, you can actually be trained by us, and become an intern. But just know that listening is really the key thing. There's this one gentleman, his name is Kevin Berthia. Have you ever heard of him? No? He presented here a little while back at the JC, and he attempted suicide on the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was a really big deal. This is back in the 90s, but I think it was 90s or early 2000s. And it was in the news, because he was just there for a long time, literally clinging on the outside of the bridge and thinking about it. And what really moved him, and I've heard him present twice, and each time it's really powerful, what really helped him was that there was an officer, because they, of course, are going to come and try to stop you. But what the officer did, he didn't talk and try to convince them with words. He just listened. And that's Kevin Berthia's biggest message, is just listen. It really allowing for that space, for somebody who is having a rough day, or you are seeing signs of them just maybe really not showing, up in the way they normally do, right? Is just really listen. Instead of trying to fix it, trying to fill in the space, the silence with words, because sometimes it's uncomfortable. But again, as a community, we can do that. And you guys here at your school have a community already. So maybe having a support group, again, work with the counselor. Maybe the counselor can provide some guidance on that, because again, if it gets into tough situations or tough conversation, you want to make sure that person gets immediate help if it's turning into a crisis. But maybe start just a gathering, during lunchtime, that you can gather over in a certain area and just start talking. about how you're having a rough day, you know, and again, talk with your counselor, because maybe the counselor says, if these are the things you notice, if you notice these specific signs, come to me immediately, right? So don't just let it fester, because although you're listening, sometimes we need more help than that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize what Rachel had said earlier too, that talking about suicide with somebody is not going to cause them to commit suicide. In fact, it's the best thing you can do, or at least talk to somebody. Just don't feel like it's too heavy and you just need to be quiet, and if you say something then it might cause everything to unravel. It is a serious thing, and sometimes adults have to get involved, parents or teachers, but this is to save a friend's life or to save someone's life. But really, a lot of the time, just listening, just asking. Sometimes people feel so isolated even though they have so many people around, and someone asking, even a stranger, can make all the difference in the world, as far as that person, instead of looking toward the Golden Gate Bridge and the water, turning and just looking at the person that's asking them a question, and that brief moment changes everything. So,
and I wanted to also open up too, because again, especially like with shows like 13 Reasons Why, again, it can be very romanticized. So what, for me, my experience, again, having attempted it back in my 20s, is that my journey since then of recovery and it continues. It's like, yay, more work, more personal work. But that's the journey. That's really the amazing experience, as difficult as it is for me getting through that and doing the healing. So if you have any questions about my experience of recovery, because again, that's the part of the story we need to hear as well. We need to hear the success stories of people surviving and choosing to be present with us and choosing to stay. So if you have any questions about that, I'll do my best.
I just had a question for you guys. What was your name? Aaron, thank you for your words and what you brought to the microphone. But you mentioned parents and parents being called. And since we're talking about access to mental health, you guys are teenagers, I'm curious what your thoughts are. On this global level, we're talking about stigma and mental health, but the reality of being a teenager and getting mental health, and both other students or peers and what they think, but also I'm curious if there's hesitancy because of parents and involvement of parents, or where they play, where their role is in all of mental health. If anyone has any comments on that or concerns that we could speak to.
Okay, my name is Erica, and I was kind of forced to have my parents involved in it because I had them when I was a lot younger. I started when I was a lot younger, and I think that parents being involved, well, at least my parents, they're always over you, always checking, are you doing this, or how are you today, or how's this, and I think for high school students that kind of turns them away, knowing that parents could potentially get involved, and they're in high school, they want to do their own thing, so the threat of parents being involved, even if it might be a good thing for them, is going to turn them away from it.
Right. So, thank you. I find that a lot. I work with teens a lot, and one of the things, a parent brings a teen in, and immediately the teen's like, great, you guys are teaming up against me. And my thought is, I want none of that, because if I'm trying to help you and collaborate, then me being an extension of your parents it's going to make my life hard. So I'm really trying to look at the family and say, okay, there's something that's not working right here. I'm not going to trust the parents' judgment on what it is, because they haven't made it better. And whatever they're doing is just pissing you guys off, so I don't want to be a part of that either. So a lot of the times what therapists will do is, even though a parent has a right to know until someone's 18 what's going on in therapy, I always make a rule with the parent, look, let this be the teen's therapy, and we'll let you know if something you need to know. If you're suicidal or something where we need to keep you safe, then they need to know. Otherwise, it's private. Why would you tell me something if I'm going to turn around and tell your parents? Most parents, actually, I've never had a parent that said they weren't open to this. So you're coming in, and the idea is that this is for you. Parents think that they have the right. They know exactly what the answer is, and they're just going to bring you in and tell me what it is. But if that was the answer, then you wouldn't be in here with me, right? So we're trying to figure out how you guys can all get along in the system. And so there are a lot of things in coming into therapy that I would say most therapists that work with teens are going to be, I don't know, actually I don't want to say most, but a good therapist is going to collaborate with you and really work with you and where you're at, and know that bringing the parents into the system and collaborating just with them against you isn't actually going to create the desired outcome. And like I said, the only time I ever talk to parents, I always tell a teen, hey, this is something I think we need to share with your parents if it is, and we figure out how to do it. Suicide is the one thing where no one wants someone else to know their parents or teachers to know they're suicidal, but we're talking about whether you're going to be alive tomorrow or not. And so getting the parents on board, not to be mad at you because you're suicidal, but like, hey, this person's struggling and they need your support. It can actually change the whole essence of the relationship when it's approached with the help. A therapist can actually help that dynamic change, I think, a lot of the time. So just to let you guys know that most therapists that want to work with teens or that are working with teens, they want to help you. They're not there to be the disciplinarian for a parent because they know that's never going to work. So just if that is helpful at all to know that, the therapy should be for you if you're going in there, not because your parents think you need therapy and now the therapist is doing their bidding.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I was wondering, from a professional perspective, what is the best way to encourage someone who is really reluctant to seek help for mental illness? Like, what is the best way to encourage someone to actually step forward and take the first step? Especially if they've had a negative experience before with a therapist or with medications.
You want to go first?
Sure. That can be a tough one. Sometimes. I mean, for me, it's just knowing when I'm out and about and I'm meeting people that I might be meeting them personally, but they may also say, oh, this guy's a therapist. He seems really whack, or he seems pretty chill, and I could maybe talk to him. And so sometimes just giving people a different impression of what a therapist is, or maybe how you approach things. The other thing, at our clinic, when people come in for medical, a lot of the time, especially with teenagers, if there's someone they think that could help and get support from us, they'll just have us come in and introduce us and just say, hey, this is Karina. And we don't push mental health. We just say, oh, hey, you're stressed, if you ever wanted to come in and talk. And I found a lot of the times that kind of, we're not forcing anybody to come in and just offering help. And again, approaching it like, hey, do you have stress? Are there things that you could have, the days where you feel overwhelmed, and we can help with that, and kind of taking away that stigma of, well, we only see people that we might have to lock up or, put into a straitjacket. So in the moment of talking with people too, destigmatizing it and saying, hey, sounds like you have a lot of stress. It might be helpful to come in and talk. We don't need to give you some weird diagnosis or, so just starting with that.
And I think also we are seeing a shift in how health is dealt with in this country, which is good. It's not quick enough for my liking, but it's starting to shift where we do ask those questions. Like if you go to your primary care physician, that's one of the questions they ask now is, are you stressed out? Something along those lines. How's everything at home? Or do you feel safe at home? So we are starting to ask those questions so that we can kind of gently make an offer if someone is in need of services, and that referral process can happen. I would say the other big thing is if you have a positive experience with accessing services or going to a therapist or, recovering from whatever has happened to you, it's really important to share those stories. And if you don't have a story, you can refer, if it's your friends or your family you're trying to encourage to get, to seek some assistance, is finding those stories to share with them, because usually that's all it takes is, if I go to someone and I tell my story and say, hey, I had this great experience with this therapist at Petaluma People Services, then they'll say, well, maybe I should go and check it out too and just see. So I think sharing those stories and finding other stories is super helpful, especially when it's your peers.
And if I can just add too, so it is by law that people can have a mental health challenge and not be treated. So that's the thing. And I think that the most visible people we see are those who are homeless, that are in the streets talking to themselves or seeming erratic. it's not because, well, homelessness can cause mental health challenges, so that's sort of the difficult part is that actually causes mental health challenge, because you can imagine being on the street and not having a place to live for years. Of course, you're going to create some symptoms, right? But again, it's, by law, which I think is good, so it means we're not forcing treatment. I think that happened in the past, and you can imagine how traumatic that would be, right, to be forced treatment. So it's good that we have that law, but it does make it difficult when we have a loved one who's choosing to not maybe find a way to get better, to not find a way towards recovery, and that's really tough, So it's a double-edged sword in a way, that we want people to have the rights to choose their own path of recovery, because it also too, it's like with addiction, right? You can't force somebody to want to get better for addiction. You can't. They have to have some, at least a kernel of desire to get better. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. The same with mental health. So it is a choice, but then again, it impacts those around us too, and not just our families, like I said, but also our community. When I see people on the streets who are homeless, who are obviously suffering with a mental health challenge, I feel that. I feel that pain. That I try to think how I can help them. Maybe I give them a couple dollars. Maybe I just reach out and say hi and say I see you. Show them I see them, but I can't actually move them from where they are to a better place in that moment, even though I want to. So it impacts all of us when we have people who are suffering. But again, and there is a right to that.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? I think we got about 5 more minutes, so we can probably take 1 or 2 questions.
So I'm Todd Siders, the teacher of this class. And recently, Casa Grande decided to work toward implementing what it's called a senior graduate profile. Basically, what do our graduates look like? And in the process of revisioning this, we reached out to the community and conducted empathy interviews. One of the questions that all the teachers that participated asked was, what do you want to see the graduates? What's your concern? And almost universally, the concern was, among others, that we are too coddling of youth, that we're not teaching them any kind of grit, and we're too nice, essentially. So hearing that, how do you reconcile the need to provide that grit and yet the compassion and empathy that so clearly this generation and all generations need?
So can I ask a question about to clarify? So when you say
Sure.
coddling, do you feel like
That was the term that was used. quite
Sure.
frequently.
So coddling meaning making life too easy, or like too.
It's hard for me to specify everyone's reaction, but that's basically, yeah, I think that the perception is that, like the complaint against the Millennials, like, here, you finished 8th place, here's a trophy, that we are too gentle, too easy, too accepting of, I don't feel good today, well, then stay home, or I can't deal with this, oh, okay, then don't try. And the belief, I think, is that we are producing a generation of young people that are not coming equipped with the wherewithal to succeed, even though more and more students are reporting some type of distress.
So can I ask, is life easy for you guys? No? But you're being coddled. I'm sorry. I don't want to put it down too much, but I don't think life is easy for anybody, and teens especially for certain reasons, because you guys are still developing your brain. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that, but the front of your brain is still developing in terms of emotional capacity and how do you manage your feelings, right? So it can seem like a really rocky road one day, and the next day is fine, you know. So you're still having your own you're still growing as a human being, and on top of that, you have the stresses of school, of other activities, of your future. So, I think what's happening is a shift in the generational perspective of teens, because I even was on a radio interview, and they're just about 13 Reasons Why, and they're just like, so this was an adult speaking, they're like, well, when I'm watching that show, I feel like they're making a really big deal out of things because I've experienced that. It was, bullying was nothing, and it's like, so okay, so we're trying to overcome stigma of mental health, and yet we still want you guys to just, buck up and just deal with it, right? for me, that's obviously not going to solve it. So I think, you know, awards for 8th place, I don't know about that, but I do think that for our mental health, it is okay to not feel well. I mean, there's days where I don't feel well, and I go to work because I'm struggling with my mental health challenge. And obviously my staff, because they work in the field, they get that, you know, and I can say I'm having a rough day, and we talk about it, you know. I'm not in depth, you know, I don't go into depth of what's going on for me personally, but just that I'm having a rough day, you know, and they really hear that. I would much rather have a community of the next generation, your generation coming up, of just having that compassion and having that empathy in place so that you guys can have that openness at your workplace, with your families, your friends, and your community, because that is what's going to overcome the stigma that really prevents people from talking about it, you know. So that's my view on that.
Well, and I think as a lazy, entitled millennial myself, I think that is probably the biggest basis of it. That's how my generation's labeled, that we're all entitled and lazy, and we don't know how to work, and we don't know how to work with other people. We don't listen, and you know, I'm sitting here the whole time thinking, what did that person do today? So I think just breaking down that generational bias in itself, in every generation, I feel like every generation has something that the older generation tells them that they're X, Y, and Z. And the great thing about the younger generations now is that they are, in my opinion, far more collaborative, I would say, than ones prior. And so I think that, you know, teaching and learning resiliency while also having a strong community is really important. And it doesn't mean, you know, everyone's going to have different work ethic and everyone's going to have different intelligence levels, but you know, I think really having that community is a way to combat this idea, and then knowing that we're all going through it. I always say this, we're all in this together. We're in this together, and unfortunately we have our, you know, it's my parents' age that call me lazy and entitled, the baby boomers, and they have us labeled like that. And all I do, me personally, how I deal with all that is I go out in the world and show them how that's not the case. And you know, we all have good days, we all have bad days, and we all, you know, we're all in it together.
Just to reiterate what you guys said, that if the older generation was doing it right, then and everything was perfect, there wouldn't be a need for it to shift in any direction. You know, so I actually really appreciate the shift. And anytime we shift, we're gonna be off a little bit on our calibration of where we're trying to be, but it has to shift if we want to change, you know. And so then you look at what's not working in the shift, and then you start moving it back toward what works, you know. And I think in a way that kind of symbolizes what we've been talking about today with mental health, that it's not this huge shift to insanity or sanity, but really finding that place where it's healthy, what works. And it's not the same for everybody. You know, some people are motivated by a little bit of anxiety. Some people shut down by a little bit of anxiety. So we all have to make our way. And the less that we can pick out what everybody else is doing wrong and just try to collaborate and say, hey, older generation, we can take this from you and drop all the other crap. And hey, older generation, you can take this from us, because we're all humans. We're all trying to grow and understand and be healthy. So
if I could just add too, so one term that we use is self-care, which is which is so funny, because of course I've had to try to learn how to do self-care with my own challenges, but I never knew the term until I started working at NAMI. So self-care is, as it implies, it's pretty common sense, is that it's how do you take care of yourself. So again, it's very good to be active out in the community. That's very healthy. Be connected with people. They did even a study to find what makes people have the best or the happiest life possible, and it's through our relationships, you know, so it's making connections. But what are those things that you can do for yourself when you are feeling anxious, when you are feeling whatever you're feeling, sad? What can you do? Journaling, you know, drawing, going out in nature, talking with your friends. So really have that in your mind. For me, I have to do that as a tool, all these tools of like, what can I do now because I'm struggling? And having it be ready beforehand obviously is better than trying to think of it in the moment.
Yeah, I kind of have a mental list of activities that for different activities for different moods for self-care. So I echo that. I think it's super helpful to have and to identify what works for you. Some people want to go out and be social. Some people want to stay in. So just identifying, you know, what works well for you and just having a list. I used to have it on a billboard kind of like a checklist to make sure I did it weekly or daily or, you know, whatever the flow is and taking that time. Super important. So is there one more question? Any burning questions? All right, well, we are gonna close out here. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. Thank you to our speakers. I will be available if you guys have more questions going forward, and I can always direct it. And we'll share all that contact information after. So thank you very much. This was DG the 30-something, and we are over and out.